When Shanks defeats Kid, the moment is preceded by a very important sequence. Shanks first sees a vision of Kid actually destroying Shanks' fleet of subordinates. This sequence may have just revealed the true reason that Oda wrote Future Sight into the story in the first place, not just for combat purposes, but for dramatic purpose, as a lot of clues throughout the story actually now come together with this scene to suggest that the moment that Luffy himself will reach the final level of Conqueror's Haki will be triggered by Luffy first seeing a particularly devastating vision through Future Sight. A vision that Luffy will absolutely have to prevent no matter what. A vision of Luffy's own crew being killed off. Confused about what I mean? What am I basing this claim off of? Well, there are 3 key points that indicate that this exact scenario will come to pass. First, how Conqueror's Haki and Luffy's growth has been developed so far. Second, what we have been told about Roger and his true nature. And finally, the specific use of Future Sight throughout the story so far that people have not discussed. But before we get into it, make sure to subscribe. And we have to talk about the fact that it is springtime. That means that some of you are going to be going outside. And if you want to feel energized and healthy this spring, just eat Factor, the sponsor for this video. Factor delivers delicious, ready-to-eat meals straight to your door. And the best part is they are made by professional chefs. So they taste really good, and they are approved by professional dietitians, so they're legitimately really good for you. With Factor, you never have to worry about your diet again, just select a plan, Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, whatever you're looking for, and that's it. Your meals are planned for you, prepared for you, and sent to you. You save time with no grocery store trips, no cooking in the evenings, and you save yourself any mental stress of trying to eat right this spring. I know Factor has definitely been helpful for me just staying healthy and in shape this past year, and my lifestyle overall feels way better now than it was when I used to just order fast food all the time. You can actually get 50% off your first Factor box today. Just head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code MORGE50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. That's factor75.com, code MORGE50 for 50% off your first Factor box. So that aside, to begin with, we need to look at one of Luffy's most important goals in the story: to become the strongest. Why specifically does he want to become the strongest? Because he wants to be able to protect those he cares about. It is not for his own sake, it is because he has realized that the world is a cruel place, and only by becoming strong can he keep those he cares about alive. This is a lesson that has been an ongoing part of Luffy's journey. From the very beginning as a child, we see that at a time where Luffy was weak and constantly had to be protected, after hearing that Sabo had died, Luffy realized that he needed to become stronger and stronger and stronger. As we see at Enies Lobby, in the wake of Aokiji and CP9 defeating the Straw Hats back to back, Luffy is even more certain that only by becoming the strongest can he keep everyone he loves safe. And finally, after the Sabaody incident and the Marineford War, where again, 2 times in a row, Luffy completely and utterly fails in keeping everyone safe, he realizes that even now he is not strong enough and he must still become much stronger. And the most important point to note here is that Luffy makes a correlation between being the strongest, between being strong enough to protect everyone he cares about, and being the Pirate King. Because Luffy can't protect anyone, in this moment he doesn't consider himself worthy of Pirate King. This can be tied to the idea that the Pirate King is meant to be the freest man on the seas. After all, it makes sense that as the strongest man on the seas, often referred to as the King of the Seas, nothing can hold power over the Pirate King or those he loves. These are all ideas and connections that are elaborated on far more in depth in my Marineford analysis, which you can click on above my head, but the point is that this continuing messaging of Luffy's need for strength in order to protect those he loves, and the thematic connection between becoming the strongest and being the Pirate King is very, very consistent throughout the story. And where it gets extremely interesting is in how Marineford also explained to us the type of person the true Pirate King, Roger, was. The type of man Luffy had not yet become. While Luffy has all along been trying to become the type of man that is strong enough to protect everyone he cares about, and is now bemoaning the fact that he is still not that man, and therefore he is not a true Pirate King, what are we simultaneously told about the actual Pirate King? We are told that Roger's most noteworthy trait was that when his crew was in danger, Roger would turn into an unstoppable demon to protect them. Roger would become a one-man army. That is the difference between Roger and Luffy being highlighted at this stage of Luffy's journey. Oda in fact doubles down on this idea throughout the Marineford saga by also showcasing how Ace is so similar to Roger, in that even when up against impossible odds, Ace too would become an unstoppable force when he was protecting someone he loved. We see this exact scenario play out in the flashback, with Ace awakening his Conqueror's Haki and becoming a demon to protect Luffy no matter what it took. This is described to be exactly like how Roger would act, and it's no mistake that Ace was portrayed as the natural successor to Roger throughout the story, the one that both Marines and even other pirates viewed as the natural next king. And so throughout the Marineford saga, it's this continuing contrast, showing where Luffy is still lacking compared to Roger and to Ace, the true mettle of the Pirate King that Luffy still seems to be missing. Luffy's greatest failing throughout the saga was in being too weak to protect those he cares about, too weak to protect his crew, being reduced to running away and begging, and then being too weak to protect his brother, instead being the one who had to be saved. Altogether proving that Luffy was, at this point, no true Pirate King. Whereas on the other hand, we are told that the true Pirate King, Roger, would become unstoppable when it came time to protect his crew, and we are shown that Ace, who carried Roger's blood as his natural successor, would also rise to the occasion when it came time to protect someone he loved. This was what the entirety of Act 1 of One Piece was leading up to, showing us why Luffy is still not yet worthy of Pirate King. He is too weak, he cannot protect those he loves, he is not like Roger, and he is not yet even like his older brother Ace. That was the fall of Luffy, and so now we need the rise. Luffy trains, and Act 2 is naturally meant to be Luffy's reversal of the failings of Act 1. And so after many arcs in the New World and many successive victories, we now see that Luffy really has climbed all the way back up from rock bottom to actually get close to his dream of Pirate King. And at this point has now even achieved Yonko status, just one step away from his goal. But even right as he reaches this level, one step away from his dream, we are told one more thing. A crucial point is made, that even now, even at this level, Luffy is still not yet at the heights that Roger was. Luffy is, even now, despite all his training and all his victories, still missing something that the true Pirate King had. Even now, there is another level of Haki yet to be attained by Luffy, one that seemingly must be attained for Luffy to truly become Pirate King. And I think that ties in brilliantly with the final step of Luffy's own personal growth that also seems to still be missing, which is, Luffy still has not proved whether or not, after all this time, he truly has become a man that can protect those he cares about from anything. Again, in Luffy's mind, that is what a true Pirate King is. And as strong as Luffy has become, and as much as he has proved in the New World, Luffy has not yet been put in a situation like Sabaody again, where in front of his eyes, his crew is about to be slaughtered. Or a situation like Marineford, where in front of his eyes he is about to lose someone he loves. That was ultimately the standard that Luffy held himself to. That is ultimately the greatest test for him, a test he once failed, a test that he has not yet had to face again. So why do I say this ties in brilliantly with the fact that Luffy still has yet to attain the same level of Haki that Roger did? Because interestingly, if we look back throughout the Marineford saga again, we see a certain common trend with Conqueror's Haki, which is that Conqueror's Haki tends to bloom when it comes time to protect those you care about. Over the course of the Marineford saga, there are 3 times that we get to see a character unlock Conqueror's Haki. Luffy at Amazon Lily, Luffy again at Marineford, and Ace in the flashback. In each case, the trigger for unleashing Conqueror's Haki was when someone they cared about was about to be killed, and they absolutely had to stop it at all costs. At Amazon Lily, Marguerite's statue is about to be shattered. Luffy is helpless, he isn't strong enough, he can't get to her in time, she's about to die, but his will to protect her is so strong that it comes out as a wave of Conqueror's Haki. Luffy's first full, true release of Conqueror's Haki in the story, born out of desperate but absolute force of will to protect someone he cares about from death, no matter what. At Marineford, it's the same thing. Ace is about to die, Luffy is too far away, Whitebeard is too injured, nobody can do anything about it. But in a moment of absolute, raw desire to prevent this loss and protect Ace no matter what, Luffy's Conqueror's Haki explodes, saving Ace's life. And yet again, we see in Ace's flashback the same thing but in reverse. Luffy is about to die, Ace is captive, there is nothing Ace can do, but his will is so strong, such an extreme resolve to not let this happen no matter what, to protect his brother no matter what, that his Conqueror spirit comes out for the first time and saves Luffy. It's just such a common idea throughout the Marineford saga. Conqueror's Haki seems to bloom at moments when there is a great, powerful desire to protect one you care about. Now that may not be the case for every character in the story, I'm sure that's not how Doflamingo got it, but my point is that so far for figures like Luffy and Ace, characters who are driven by their bonds with others, that seems to be the most powerful trigger. Interestingly, that is also noted to be what was most important to Roger, protecting his loved ones. And that brings us back again to the fact that Roger was said to be at his most fearsome, specifically at moments when his crew was in danger. We know that Roger's level of Haki was supposedly even greater than anything that we've seen today. So tying these two aspects of his character together, his unmatched Haki and his unstoppable strength, specifically when his crew was in danger, as well as considering the common trend for Conqueror's Haki to bloom when protecting someone you love, perhaps this mythical highest level of Haki that Roger attained was in the heat of battle as he rose to the occasion to protect his crew. That's why it's so interesting that we are told that Luffy has not yet reached the level of Haki that Roger had. After all, Luffy's done the training, he's figured out the trick to advance Conqueror's Haki, he can split the sky and everything, but he still somehow hasn't quite reached the heights of the previous Pirate King. Perhaps that's because Luffy's final Haki bloom, the moment that his Conqueror's Haki becomes as great or perhaps even greater than Roger's, would be the same moment that all of Luffy's own personal growth comes to its natural conclusion. The moment he becomes the type of man who can protect his crew from anything, the type of man who is strong enough that he won't lose someone he cares about in front of his eyes. The same exact moment that Luffy would become the type of man he envisions the Pirate King to be. Essentially, Luffy's final step in Conqueror's Haki, his final Haki bloom, may very well be triggered by a moment where his crew is about to die, a moment where it seems there is nothing Luffy can do to stop it, until, in an act of absolute extreme will, he lets out a level of Conqueror's Haki he never could have before, and is able to stop the worst possible scenario from happening. It would be a reversal of Sabaody, a reversal of Marineford, it would be living up to the type of man Roger was, the type of man Luffy himself believes the Pirate King to be. It would be the moment where Luffy reaches the same level of Haki that seemingly only Roger had ever reached before. And it would be consistent with how we have seen Conqueror's Haki blooms be triggered in the past. Now maybe this sounds like fanfiction, but here's the final point. Enter the concept of Future Sight. And specifically what Oda just showed us with Future Sight in the Shanks vs. Kid scene. Now, Future Sight is undeniably a very cool concept, but many readers have been disappointed with its actual implementation in fights. This is largely because there are often little to no cues to differentiate for the reader when standard observation Haki is being used or Future Sight is being used. There are moments where we get context clues, such as Luffy referencing that something is about to happen, but in general there are little to no visual cues. One of the strangest things about the ability is that we almost never actually get to see visions of the future that characters are seeing, which would naturally be the most interesting use of Future Sight. We are kind of just told at certain points that characters are seeing the future, which has very little effect on the actual reading experience of a fight. In fact, look at the entire finale of Luffy vs. Katakuri. In the final round where Luffy is in Snake Man form and both Luffy and Katakuri are now using Future Sight, the final round is kind of bizarre in that this battle between two characters who are seeing the future pretty much plays out exactly like what a normal battle would look like. From the reader's perspective, this final round reads pretty much exactly the same whether the characters are using Future Sight or not. This may as well be the exact same battle choreography as something like Luffy vs. Lucci. It is simply assumed that Luffy and Katakuri are both seeing several steps ahead as they fight, but it's not really shown to us in any meaningful way. To be clear, Snake Man Luffy vs. Katakuri is maybe my favorite action chapter in all of One Piece, but it's not because of Future Sight. The Future Sight is just assumed to be there. This extends to Luffy vs. Kaido as well. For a good portion of the fight, many readers were confused as to whether or not Kaido was also using Future Sight. And many assume that Kaido must be using it, otherwise how could he keep up with Luffy, who is a Future Sight user? Unless Luffy hasn't been using Future Sight for some reason, etc, etc. And then only really late in the game does Kaido suddenly reveal that he is only now going to start using Future Sight, which itself is then basically never referenced again throughout the battle. Beyond this little acknowledgement, Future Sight doesn't really play any sort of a role in the fight at all. And from the reader's perspective, we can barely tell what impact it is having on the fight. Everything would look pretty much exactly the same to us, whether Future Sight is on or off throughout Luffy vs. Kaido. So all of that considered, it begs the question, why was Future Sight ever important to add to the story? Why was Oda so bent on writing in the ability to see the future if it doesn't really enhance One Piece fights at all? Most importantly, why is it important that Luffy be able to see the future? Well, I think it's very likely because Oda's true purpose for coming up with Future Sight was never for making combat more interesting. The reality is, One Piece fights are generally more straightforward fisticuffs. I think getting into the area of characters repeatedly seeing visions and trying to think 10 steps ahead to counter said visions and leading us down a convoluted genjutsu train is just too different from how Oda likes to write Luffy's combat normally. I think what Oda generally cares about more with fights is crafting powerful, dramatic moments. And in particular, Future Sight provides the opportunity to create the absolute most dramatic moment and maybe the single most dramatic power-up one could ever imagine in manga. I think Oda wanted Luffy to be able to see the future because Luffy's final Haki bloom, his final and most significant power-up in the story, may be triggered by Luffy seeing a vision of his crew being killed. A vision that only Luffy would have the power to stop. A vision that could only be stopped by Luffy unleashing every ounce of will he has to make sure that he doesn't lose everyone he loves right before his eyes. Really think about Future Sight so far. Oda pretty much never bothers to show us Future Sight visions during actual combat. He doesn't care about that. However, there are 2 instances, and only 2 instances, in all of One Piece of us being shown an actual full-fledged vision into the future from a Future Sight user. That was first, Katakuri seeing Pudding falling over at the wedding, and second, Shanks seeing his fleet was about to die. Both moments weren't part of fights to make combat more interesting, rather both moments were dramatic moments. That seems to be the real purpose of Oda writing Future Sight into the story. He doesn't care about using it in fights. He likes using Future Sight for dramatic storytelling, showing us a vision of a plot twist at a wedding, showing us a vision of a terrible future that could happen to Shanks' fleet if Shanks isn't strong enough to protect them. The drama of a character seeing the future is what matters. And so looking at this Shanks scene in particular, Shanks seeing his fleet about to die and rushing in to save them, could Oda have just tipped his hand as to the real reason he wanted Luffy to be able to see the future? Could this Shanks scene be a small preview to a very similar and far more important scene in the future for the main character? We know the parallels between Roger, Shanks, and Luffy throughout the story, and so could the scene with Shanks have been a foreshadowing of what Luffy will one day be seeing through his Future Sight for the Straw Hat Pirates? In a reversal of Sabaody Archipelago, where Luffy failed as a captain and failed to live up to the standard of Pirate King, is everything leading up to a moment where Luffy sees a vision of him losing his crew once again. Only this time, Luffy is able to push himself to change this future with his final and greatest Conqueror's Haki bloom, one worthy of Pirate King. After all, the biggest message we were given to go alongside the introduction of the power of Future Sight was that seeing the future isn't what's important. What matters is the power to change it. I believe that is why Oda wanted Luffy to be able to see the future, so that Luffy's journey of growth could lead to a scene where he sees the worst future imaginable, and through sheer force of will he is able to stop it, unleashing the full potential of his Haki in the process, reaching the level of strength of Roger, redeeming his own past failures as captain, and becoming the type of man he always wanted to be. One who is strong enough to protect everyone he loves. So let me know if you agree about this potential dramatic use of Future Sight for Luffy's final power-up in the story in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video then definitely like and subscribe. And make sure to get your very own Shanks poster today by going to the Mord store, just hit the link in the description below. And you can get my extended, unfiltered thoughts on this and all future topics by becoming a member and getting my podcast, just hit the button below.